Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maika Sanderson, and I am the Grant Program Manager for the Farm to School Grant Program. Welcome to today's webinar about the FY18 Farm to School Grant Program opportunity. I'm joined today by the lovely Anna Aerosmith, one of our two grant officers. Anna, you want to say a quick hello?
Hello, everybody.
We are super pumped to have you. We have a lot of fantastic information for you all today in terms of what you need to do to prepare your answer to the RFA. And we'll provide you with kind of an overview of the application as well as some tips and tricks so that you can successfully submit a proposal. So the agenda for today, as I kind of briefly went through, we'll give you some background information about the Farm to School Grant Program. We'll then give you an overview about the grant program and the opportunity and the different grant track types and the requirements for them. We'll then walk through Grants.gov, which is a bit of a beast, but we think after today's webinar you all will feel very comfortable navigating Grants.gov. We'll tell you about the registration process, the required forms, and the format in which you should be submitting your proposal on Grants.gov. We'll talk a little bit about scoring. Then we'll also talk about how to prepare your budget and the match. We'll go through some resources that will be really helpful for you over the next 2 months as you prepare your proposal. And then, of course, we will have time for some Q&A where you guys will be able to ask us some questions. So some really quick notes on housekeeping. As you all saw through your registration email, all of the audio is through your computers, so please turn up the speakers on your computer to hear us nice and clearly. We're going to hold off on Q&A until the very end of the webinar. You can go ahead and chat it into the chat box, and we'll make sure to answer it at the end. Okay, so we're going to get started. So what is Farm to School? And Farm to School, simply stated, is really all about bringing local produce into the school cafeterias. And that mission can really be realized in a number of different ways. So it can be equipping schools with the tools necessary to identify produce that's local to their area and figuring out the best ways to incorporate it into the school meals program. And when we say the school meals program, we're talking about everything. So not only National School Lunch Program and the School Breakfast Program, but as well as the Child and Adult Care Food Program and the Summer Food Program. Farm to School can also look like launching a school garden and having students come into the garden to plant and harvest and even use that produce that's produced in your garden and incorporating it into the school cafeteria. Farm to School is all about offering experiential activities to students so that they can have the opportunity to really understand where their food is coming from and why it's important to eat fruits and vegetables in terms of leading a healthy life. And then also, Farm to School can look like integrating and developing curriculum that not only folds in core competencies like science and math, but makes that connection to how food is grown and how it impacts our health and well-being. So an important thing to remember is that local food can really span the entire meal tray. I think oftentimes when we talk about local produce, folks often think about fresh fruit and vegetables, but it's a much broader conversation than that. Local produce can be local dairy, it can be local protein, fish, eggs, chicken, bison, as well as local beans, grain, and flour. So really making sure that we're thinking about all the different components that end up on our child's meal trays and how those can be locally sourced. So why does Farm to School matter? Why is this work incredibly important? And so there's been a growing body of evidence in the literature that shows that kids that are exposed to Farm to School programming and have more opportunities to be exposed to fresh fruits and vegetables are more willing to try new foods. There's increased consumption of fruits and vegetables. They also have improved knowledge and awareness around gardening techniques, agricultural production, and healthy eating, really understanding how eating fresh fruits and vegetables and other local goods can really help in terms of laying the foundation for lifelong healthy habits. And then not only that, not only does farm-to-school programming impact the school community, but it impacts the broader community. So by working with local agricultural producers like farmers and fishermen and ranchers, we're able to create a whole new market for them by connecting them to their local school districts, which helps to just create a circle in which we can grow the economy and really help to enrich communities financially as well. So now we're going to transition into an overview of the USDA Farm to School Grant Program. So we'll hit you with a little bit of the history, what have we done until this point, and kind of what opportunities lie ahead in terms of the Farm to School Grant Program. So the history and purpose of the Farm to School Program, so maybe many of you already know this, but the Farm to School Program was actually established in the Healthy, Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010, in which the Farm to School Program was brought into being. And its purpose was really to improve access to local foods in eligible schools across the nation through grants and technical assistance. So the Healthy, Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010 not only established the Farm to School Grant Program, but also established the Office of Community Food Systems, the Farm to School team. Our team in this grant program is housed in USDA's Food and Nutrition Services. So each year, we actually give $5 million in grant funding in order to push out the Farm to School mission of bringing local produce into school cafeterias across the nation. So the grants really help to support training, supporting operations, planning of farm to school activities, purchasing equipment that helps schools to kind of further scale their farm to school activities, as well as agricultural producers and other entities, developing partnerships with people in the community, as well as implementing farm to school programs. So it's hard to believe, but we are celebrating 5 years of doing the Farm to School Grant Program, which is pretty exciting. It's so funny because I know that there are tons of grant programs in the government that have had many more years under their belt, but 5 years is a pretty big marker for us. So we're excited to have been able to do this for 5 years so far. So to date, what have we done? What has it looked like? So our first grant program was in fiscal year 2013. To date, we've funded 365 projects that have touched all 50 states, as well as the District of Columbia and the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico as of fiscal year 2017. We've given over $25 million in grant funding, and we've received requests from over 1,600 projects that have actually sought over $120 million in grant requests. So for those who are actually selected for a Farm to School Grant Award, it is definitely a very prestigious grant to have received in light of the competition. So for fiscal year 17, for every 5 grant requests that we received, we were actually only able to award 1. So a 1 in 5 chance. So it's definitely a very competitive grant program. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. So you all are taking the right steps by participating in today's webinar to kind of get the scoop on how to prepare a successful proposal. So let's dive into the general eligibility requirements for the Farm to School Grant Program. So who can apply? Which entities are eligible for this particular grant funding? So schools are eligible to apply, and that's defined as pre-K through 12 school food authorities or other entities that participate in the National School Lunch or breakfast program. That's very key that one of these 2 school meal programs are operated in a school to be eligible. It also includes private schools, charter schools that meet this particular criteria. State and local agencies are eligible, as well as Indian tribal organizations, nonprofit entities. You have to show that you have 501c3 status, as well as small and medium-sized agricultural producers or groups of small and medium-sized agricultural producers. So folks may be wondering, what's a small or medium-sized agricultural producer? What do we consider that to be? So if you fulfill one of the 2 following criteria, you could potentially be eligible. So it's either taking a look at how much income you've brought in the previous calendar year or how big your farm is this year. So in terms of income, a small to medium-sized farm is any place that has grossed up to $1 million of agricultural products that have been sold during the previous calendar year. And then in terms of size, if you prefer to take a look at the criteria for size, if your farm is less than 1,582 acres, then you would be considered a small or medium-sized agricultural producer for this particular funding opportunity. So what's not eligible? And so we can list these out because these folks have applied in the past, and we've unfortunately have not been able to push them forward for review, these particular applications. So institutions of higher learning, so universities, colleges, are not eligible for the Farm to School grant program. Cooperative extensions are also not eligible, as well as individual parents or individual teachers. We love the enthusiasm, but unfortunately, it would be better to convince your school district to apply, as individual parents and teachers are not eligible, nor are hospitals. So, but what I want to highlight is that these particular entities, with the exception of individuals, so individual parents or teachers, can be key partners. So you cannot be the lead applicant, meaning the individual that's submitting and fully preparing the application, but you can certainly be a collaborator or a key partner that will work closely with the lead applicant to execute on the particular project or proposal. So you may be wondering, if I am selected, what does a Farm to School grantee have to do? What are those requirements? So a few key requirements are any webinars. There could be periodic webinars that are offered throughout the course of the grant term. Oftentimes they are in the form of the onboarding webinar as well as an evaluation and reporting webinar that grantees must attend. So if you're unable to attend, you can then watch a recording. Grantees must also attend a face-to-face meeting. It's called the Grantee Gathering, where all of the selected grantees come together for a day-and-a-half programming to discuss kind of key tips and tricks and strategies for having a successful Farm to School grant program. The cost of attending this grantee gathering should be incorporated into your budget proposal. So it wouldn't come out of pocket, but instead would come out of the grant funds that would be given to you as an awarded grantee. In addition, grantees have to complete quarterly reporting and evaluation activities of their grants to just ensure that you're executing according to the timeline that you indicated in your proposal, as well as checking to see if you're hitting those benchmarks of success for your particular project. So I see that there's a question about, does a whole school district have to apply, or can just one school apply? One or more schools can apply, or the whole entire district. It is up to the discretion of the individual, but that is allowable. I would like to highlight that we are prioritizing proposals that impact more than one school, so it's highly recommended that you are able to kind of have your project impact more than one school. So there are several grant tracks through which an applicant can apply in terms of receiving funds for the Farm to School grant program. So the 3 grant tracks are planning, implementation, and training grants. So in terms of you all who might have been familiar with the Farm to School grant program for last year, maybe wondering where are support services grants and what's going on with schools? Will they still be awarded at the same rate as they have been in previous years? And they will. We did streamline the tracks and collapse support service into implementation grants, but we do still intend on awarding schools at a similar trend as previous fiscal years. So at least 50% of all awards will go to schools. In addition, in terms of distributing awards, USDA seeks to make sure that we have geographical diversity, meaning that we have projects that are representative of all states or as many states as possible across the country. I see a lot of eligibility questions coming in. For those that I'm unable to answer right in the moment, I'll make sure that we loop back on them at the end. Another common question that we get is, how many projects can I apply for? So you can serve as the lead on only one application. So that means you have to choose between submitting a planning, an implementation, or a training grant. You can only submit one application. However, you can be listed as a collaborator or a key partner on more than one application. So let's dive in a little bit deeper into the different grant track types. You might be wondering, why do we have different grant track types, and what are the differences? So in terms of looking at the grant program from a high level, we want to make sure that we're funding different types of farm-to-school activities. So by having the various grant track types, we can make sure we are awarding to folks who are in different stages or in different places of need when it comes to farm-to-school activities. So in terms of planning grants, the funding range for planning grants are $20,000 to $50,000. The project must be completed within 12 months or 24 months, so it has to be a 1 or 2 year project. No more than 10% of the budget can go toward food costs, and it's really only towards educational uses of food. So unfortunately, those food costs cannot be for catering lunches, for teams who are planning or working on the grant. They are more for taste tests and trying to figure out which types of local foods would be best integrated into the school meal program or other similar activities of that nature. A 25% match is required for planning grants. To note, equipment is not an allowable expense for planning grants, as you are in the phase of planning your farm-to-school activities, so you aren't doing as much of the implementation. Therefore, equipment wouldn't be necessary at this stage. For planning grants, 3 letters of support are required. You need to show that there is support in whatever community or school community that you plan to implement your farm-to-school work in. So it's important to show that not only that higher level and administration is on board, perhaps a superintendent, perhaps a principal, but you also want to make sure that the food service director is on board, or if you're a nonprofit working with schools, that the actual schools that you're looking to target are on board with this idea of launching or planning for a farm-to-school program. So as I mentioned before, planning grants are really in place to help groups organize and structure their farm-to-school efforts. It's an opportunity to incorporate best practices for farm-to-school right into the foundation of your plan. In terms of who can apply, all of the entities that I mentioned at the top are able to apply. So school districts, state and local agencies, Indian tribal organizations, agricultural producers, as well as nonprofits. So what are some things that you are allowed to do for a planning grant? So some of the activities that we are typically looking for or have typically seen in awarded applications, but it's not completely limited to these, are folks who have tried to assess the need and readiness for development of a farm-to-school program. So they're identifying the gaps in knowledge, they're determining what training is needed, they're looking for tools and resources to disseminate. They're looking to identify what obstacles that could prevent them from launching a farm-to-school program and figuring out what those potential solutions could be. And then they're also talking to a wide range of community stakeholders. So they're probably talking to local producers in their area, seeing what the growing season is, seeing what produce is available, at what price points, to what specifications. But they're also working with various other entities in the area just to make sure that they have all of the right folks at the table in order to ensure that once this program launches, that everyone is on board and in support. Important to note, planning requires a farm-to-school action plan. So if you are awarded throughout the course of your planning grant, you're expected to complete a farm-to-school action plan, which at the end of your grant term, you'll be able to use this document to actually launch your farm-to-school program. So planning proposal narrative has a couple of key components. I really highly suggest everybody make sure that they look and read the RFA closely before they begin writing. The key components of the proposal narrative for planning grants are farm-to-school background information. We want a sense of why now, what kinds of farm-to-school activities, if any, I'd imagine very little, have been done, kind of just giving us a sense of kind of what has been done to date, and understandably it shouldn't be too much if you're in the planning stages, but really getting a sense of what potential obstacles and challenges and successes you may have seen. Understanding the need and using supporting data such as the farm-to-school census, objectives, activities, and timeline, really outlining what you're going to do during the course of your grant project. Evaluation, thinking critically about if this is the project that I hope to implement, these are the various metrics that I want to measure throughout in order to make sure that I am hitting all of the key activities of my project. Sustainability, thinking about how can you sustain your project after the grant term is over. So once the funding has ended, what plans do you have in place to continue this work? And then really discussing staffing. You kind of showing us that you have a team that is equipped to execute on the plan that you've outlined, that you have a plan in place to ensure that all necessary parts are executed in a timely fashion. So implementation grants. So the funding range for implementation grants are $50,000 to $100,000. They are 1 or 2 year grants. Just like planning grants, you cannot spend any more than 10% of the budget on food costs, again, for educational purposes alone. A 25% match is required, and just like planning grants, 3 letters of support are required. Again, we highly suggest that you get a variety of support letters, meaning you may want to do some from administrative level to food service directors or to folks in the community, but really you want to make sure your letters of support indicate that you have backing behind you to do this work, and that folks will kind of be on board once you receive the funding and get going on those activities. So implementation grants, unlike planning grants, these individuals have done some farm-to-school work, have had some planning already done in the works, and they're really looking to scale their existing farm-to-school efforts in order to broaden reach and really expand. So in terms of who can apply, it's all of the folks that are eligible for planning grants. So again, it's schools and school districts, Indian tribal organizations, state and local agencies, nonprofits, as well as agricultural producers. So we did a lot of streamlining around kind of eligibility in terms of entity type. So far we're pitching everyone is eligible for implementation among the eligible entities, and the same for planning. So some allowable activities for implementation. I'm going to try to zoom through this, but some thoughts, and again, it's not limited to this list, but things that we've seen in the past. Those who want to operate service projects to further scale current farm-to-school initiatives in schools, folks that are looking to aggregate the local food supply to more effectively meet the needs of school districts, as well as readying producers to participate in the school food market. So that could be providing GAP training or other food safety training, teaching farmers how to market to schools, making connections between farmers and schools, facilitating those relationships and making them easier. Testing products or conducting school food market feasibility analyses, developing new local food products or formulations that meet the school nutrition standards, forming statewide or regional network or coalitions that support farm-to-school activities, hosting networking or other meet and greet events that really bring together people from across the food supply chain and the community food system, so regional producers, processors, manufacturers, distributors, school food service directors, developing promotional campaigns that support farm-to-school initiatives. You could think about state agencies that may be doing kind of pushing out marketing in terms of harvest of the month or harvest of the week, strategic planning to expand and coordinate efforts, and also thinking about conducting farm-to-school evaluation efforts and disseminating those findings. So in terms of the proposal narrative, there are a couple of sections. Please, again, refer to the RFA for more in-depth information for what you should be including for each part. But it's farm-to-school experience, so we want to know what you've done in the past. What's the need? We want you to provide us data and really talk about why is this project important at this time. The project, we want you to be very detailed, provide objectives, a timeline, activities in terms of how you plan on accomplishing your project. Evaluation, what are those metrics that you're going to be measuring that include both qualitative and quantitative metrics. So quantitative, think numbers, surveys. I should say you should think numbers, and qualitative is more about kind of those kind of paragraph answers, kind of doing interviews and kind of identifying what were the sentiments before and then perhaps after implementing your farm-to-school programming. Sustainability, how are you going to continue the programming after the grant funding has ended? And then again, showing us that you have staffing that is ample and adequate as well as has the expertise to execute on the project that you've proposed. And to keep it on time, Now we're moving into training grants. So the funding range for training grants are $20,000 to $50,000. So in terms of training grant proposals, they should be either a state, regional, or national focus. And so that's what you should think about in terms of the scope and reach for these particular trainings. These grants are to be executed within 12 months. A 25% match is required, and only one letter of support is required. And so the idea here is that you would provide a letter of support from an intended grant training attendee that you're hoping to reach with your particular training, just showing that there is a need for the training and why this individual thinks that this is something that is beneficial in terms of moving forward farm-to-school activities for a given state, region, or area. So in terms of training grants, there, as I mentioned, are to support state, regional, and national trainings and really to provide technical assistance in the area of local procurement, food safety, school gardens, culinary education, and agricultural-based curriculum. In terms of who can apply, so this is the only one where not all of the eligible entities are eligible. So as you can see, what's missing from this list are schools and school districts. Schools and school districts are ineligible for training grants, but nonprofits, state and local agencies, Indian tribal organizations, and agricultural producers can in fact apply to training grants. And I saw a question come in the box. Yes, in terms of the evaluation portion, grantees or applicants can indicate that an outside organization is going to conduct their evaluation. However, we still need to see in the proposal your intended plans for that particular evaluation. So in terms of allowable activities, I think people have a pretty good sense. Training is much more self-explanatory, I think, than the other types. But technical assistance trainings that address local procurement for the school meals program, training events that bring together stakeholders from across the supply chain, trainings on school garden development, culinary training, or educational activities such as like a junior chef competition where local products can be incorporated into the school meals program, and then from that competition perhaps that particular meal or item can get incorporated into the actual meal service. Also national, state, or regional trainings that help to support information sharing across groups, so across various school districts or distributors and manufacturers, just all of the different players across the supply chain, breaking down those silos and getting communication happening across them. Training grants are perfect for that kind of work. I saw a question. Yes, I will be sending this particular slideshow to everyone so that they could have it after today's webinar. So in terms of the training proposal narrative, the farm to school background information, we want to know what kind of trainings you've held in the past. Have you done any farm to school trainings or trainings in general? What's the need? Provide that data to support why this training is needed in terms of farm to school activities or amount of local produce. You may be wondering, where can I get this data from? Definitely check out the farm to school census. A little bit more on that later in this webinar. We want you to describe the proposed training and actually include a draft agenda in your proposal for that training that you're looking to conduct. And then telling us why it's relevant for the particular audience and time, and then also really showing us again that you have adequate staff to execute. They have the expertise needed to kind of actually do the particular proposal that you propose. So on this page, we've actually given you a quick overview of each of the different grant track types. I know that I dumped a ton of information on you all. Hopefully you guys aren't glazed over and sleeping. So here you can kind of get the quick high level of the 3 grant track types. So updates for fiscal year 2018. I know that we have a lot of folks that, because we're such a competitive grant program, that apply across fiscal years. So there are some changes that we would want to highlight for you all who are familiar with last year's process. So as I mentioned at the top of the call, we did streamline the grant track types. So all eligible entities may apply for planning and implementation tracks, which that should make people's lives easier, and that's what we seek to do. So for training grants, everyone is eligible in terms of eligible entities, with the exception of schools and school districts. We revised the priority for summer and CACSP operators. We're still accepting them, but they're no longer a priority for this particular fiscal year. We want to highlight that if you are a summer or CACSP operator, that you still must be one of those eligible entities, so a nonprofit or a school district, ITO, etc. And it must be school-based. That summer or CACSP program must be happening on-site at a school. Now, the only exception that is for training grants. So if you are providing training for summer and CACSP operators, those summer and CACSP operators can be doing work that extends beyond the school. We did, in fact, add a policy for repeat grantees. So because we want to make sure that, because this funding stream is so competitive, we want to make sure that folks who have applied multiple times and who have not been able to receive a fund have a better opportunity. So for folks who have received a grant in fiscal year 16 or 17, they are ineligible to apply for fiscal year 18. So essentially it'll be, if you received an award in the last 2 fiscal years, you're unable to apply for this current fiscal year. Or if you are currently in the process of completing a grant with us, that also makes you ineligible for applying for this year's grant opportunity. The last thing we wanted to highlight for folks is that we updated the score sheet criteria. So it's a bit more specific in terms of what we're looking for in each component of the proposal narrative, so please take a look at that closely. In terms of summarizing all of the changes that are in the RFA for this year, please check out page 3 of the RFA. So FY 2018 priorities. School districts are a priority. We will be giving at least 50% of the planning and implementation awards to schools and school districts. And then also applications serving tribal communities. So that means if you're an Indian tribal organization, the priority would apply, as well as if you're an organization in which your proposal would reach 50% or more of a Native population, also would receive the priority. State agencies are a priority. Projects that reach more than one school and projects that serve a high proportion of children who are eligible for free or reduced price meals. How to apply? I'm going to turn this over to Anna.
Okay, thanks, Micah. I'm going to ask you to, unless that'll work.
No,
all right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I want to give you an overview of the process for getting set up to apply through Grants.gov. I'm going to harp on a couple things. One mostly is to plan ahead and to apply well in advance of the deadline. And you're going to get tired of hearing me say it, but I'm going to keep bringing it up throughout my slides that I talk about. Because the reason that I'm harping on that is last year we had 27 applications that were rejected by Grants.gov. Most of these were due to preventable errors, so I want to address them today. So just imagine if after spending all the time and energy writing your application that it didn't even reach FNS due to a submission error on Grants.gov. I know that I used to write grants, and I know how stressful it can be, and I don't think I know I would not have handled it well if my applications hadn't gone through because I missed something in the registration process. So let's make sure that doesn't happen to you. We had several great little videos to show you from Grants.gov, but they wouldn't play when we tried them in this webinar tool, so instead I've got the links at the bottom of each of these slides where we originally had a video for you. I'm typically not a fan of that type of thing, but they're very short and they're very clear, so I encourage you to watch them when you have a chance. There's 4 steps that you're going to need to complete before you can even submit your application, and here's the first time I'm going to say it. I strongly encourage you to start this process right away because it can take some time to get it all completed, up to 3 weeks if this is your first time registering. So before I go through the steps with you, I want to highlight the contact information for Grants.gov support information. They have a website that we all should aspire to. They've got some great resources on their website. They have on this slide, we have their email, a phone number that you can call, a link to their support page which has an extensive list of FAQs and tutorials that should be able to answer any questions you have. And they are available 24/7, so you should be able to get assistance from them at any time. Excuse me, the link at the bottom of this page for application instructions will take you to the Grants.gov website's page that you see in the image on this slide, and it's the application instructions for organizations. There's also the option to apply as an individual, but that does not apply to any of you for purposes of this grant here. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to need to do is get your DUNS number. DUNS stands for Dun & Bradstreet, and because you are applying on behalf of an organization, you should already have a DUNS number. On the off chance that you do not, you can apply for one at www.dnb.com to get one, and the link is at the top of this slide. Once you have your DUNS number, then you need to register at sam.gov. SAM stands for System for Award Management, and it's where any entity desiring to do business with the federal government must register. It's free to register, but register you must. And in order to register for SAM, I feel like I'm sending you down on a treasure hunt of all these things that you need to get in order. But if you get this all lined up, it'll make it a lot easier when you go to do it. So in order to register for SAM, you must have your DUNS number. You need to have your tax ID number. You have to have the name of your e-biz or e-business point of contact. And you need to have your marketing partner identification number, or your MPIN. Your e-biz point of contact and your MPIN number are both determined by your organization. Your e-biz point of contact is the single person that's responsible for the administration and management of grant activities in your organization. So you want to make sure that you know who that is if you already have one. If you don't have one and you need to designate one, make sure that you choose somebody who is going to be available to respond to emails and access SAM and Grants.gov when necessary. This isn't somebody that you want to be your state superintendent or even your county superintendent of schools or the executive director of your nonprofit if you're a large nonprofit, because this person's going to have to be available throughout the application process. And then your MPIN is an access code that you're going to create when you're registering for SAM, and it links your records to the different grants and other things that you can do through SAM. So at the bottom of this slide is a link to one of the other handy-dandy YouTube videos that will walk you through this process as well. This particular process, particularly the SAM piece, can take several weeks to complete. So it's really, here I go again, it's really important to start this process as soon as possible. This is a place where applicants can fall short and miss the application deadline because they didn't get this taken care of far enough in advance. I just didn't want this to be overlooked, so I gave it its very own great big slide with big huge font. Please, please, please begin the process to get your DUNS number and register in SAM as soon as you can. This, like I just said 27 other times, this can take up to 3 weeks to process. If you already have a DUNS number and are registered with SAM, this is the time to log in and make sure that you have the correct DUNS number and that your SAM registration is current. Oftentimes, entities like state agencies or school districts may have more than one DUNS number. In a school district, there could be a DUNS number for the school nutrition programs, a different one for transportation, a different one for HR. For a state agency, it could be the state of Virginia could have a DUNS, and then the Virginia Department of Education could have a DUNS. So you want to make sure that you're working with the correct DUNS number before the day that it's time to submit your application. And please make sure that the DUNS number that you are using is associated with the SAM account that you're going to be using. You know, if you're going to be registered with SAM and you have the wrong DUNS number associated with it, that's going to cause problems at the time of application. And SAM accounts do expire. They last for about a year, so make sure yours is current. If your SAM account is current at the time of application but expires before the grants are awarded, if we're considering you, if you're selected for award, we'll accept the application, but you're going to have to renew your SAM registration before we can award the grant. Okay, then after registering with Dun & Bradstreet and SAM, we're getting closer. You must now register an account with Grants.gov. So to create this account, you're going to need to have your DUNS number handy. Grants.gov will take your DUNS number and it will pull in the information from your SAM account, which is why you need to make sure that they're both in order before you register with Grants.gov. So from any page within the Grants.gov website, you can click on the button for applicants, which is towards the top half of this slide. It's got a big red arrow pointing to it. And then a little window will pop up where you can click on Organization Applicant Registration which I've got in a red circle here, and then follow the prompts. Any of the Grants.gov homepage or any of the other pages within Grants.gov will have that same navigation bar up at the top. And again, there's a link at the bottom of this slide that will also walk you through the process. And again, I'll say, please do this as soon as possible. We don't want it to get to be time for you to apply and you're still going through the registration process. Okay, the next is your Grants.gov roles. So when registering with Grants.gov, your E-biz point of contact will approve users to apply for federal grants on behalf of your organization. The biggest role is the Authorized Organization Representative, or the AOR, because we like acronyms in the government. The AOR may be the same person as your E-biz POC, or your E-biz point of contact can authorize somebody else to serve as the AOR. But it is the person that's going to be, the AOR is the person that is permitted to submit a Grants.gov application on behalf of their organization. So let's revisit my sad story of the 27 applications that were not accepted last year. This was one of the big pain points there. Applicants who had registered for Grants.gov in prior years, they did not log in to make sure that their AOR was still in a position to submit the application. Some of them, the AOR had actually left the organization, so they couldn't even say, we know you've been promoted to president of the company, but we need you to submit this application. That person was gone, and then those applicants were not able to submit their application after all the blood, sweat, and tears of writing those applications. And then what happened was the applicants who waited until the actual due date to submit their application, those applications were rejected by Grants.gov, and the applicants did not have sufficient time to update the AOR contact information. So if you are, I'm going to reiterate, if you're registering for Grants.gov for the first time, please be sure that your AOR is going to be available to submit the application in December. If you're already registered on Grants.gov, check to see who is listed as the AOR and make sure that that person will be available to submit. If you need to change the AOR designation, that can take a week or so, depending on how busy they are. So again, there's a link at the bottom of this slide to the YouTube video that walks you through this process.
And I'm going to hop in. This is Maika busting in on Anna's show. But those videos are awesome, and they're literally like 90 seconds or 2 minutes and give you a lot of really great, clear information. So please, 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 please go watch those.
Yes, I concur. All right. Finally, you get to the point where you can actually submit your application. Grants.gov offers 2 ways to submit your application, the traditional PDF package upload and the workspace online environment. The traditional PDF package upload is being phased out, and it won't be available after the end of this calendar year. The traditional PDF package is a multi-page PDF that applicants submit. It can be a large file, and it's difficult to share with others and work on collaboratively. However, with Workspace, it's a newer feature of Grants.gov within the last couple years, and it allows grantees to work on their application in a secure online environment. So if you've got more than one person working on the application with you, one can log in and work on it. They might not finish their piece. They can save it. Grants.gov will hold it, and then you can log in later and finish it up, or somebody else can log in and they can review what you've done and provide feedback, and you're just working with one document. You don't have to worry about version control because it can be updated and worked on by multiple users at the same time. If you haven't figured it out yet, we are encouraging folks to use the Workspace feature instead of the traditional PDF package because we think it's better and because the PDF is being phased out. So on this slide, there are 2 links to YouTube videos for you. The first is an overview of Workspace, just what it is, and then the second link on the slide here is actually a series of tutorials for using Workspace. Okay, the next one is verifying your successful submission and acceptance of your application. Grants.gov will send several emails once your application is submitted. You want to make sure that you get them all. The first one that you get is an acknowledgement email. And basically what that says is, we received your application. That doesn't say we're going to keep it. It doesn't say there's errors. It just says we received your application. Then the next one you get is either a validation or a rejection email. It will either tell you that your application is error-free and that we are going to keep it, or it will tell you that your application is being rejected with errors, and it will tell you what the errors are. And if you are not submitting at the last second, then you'll have an opportunity to correct the errors. And then after that, you'll get another email for agency retrieval, and it will tell you that FNS has your application, and you will also get an email with a tracking number. So you can track your status on Grants.gov, or you can use it as a reference in case you need to contact Grants.gov for any reason. And again, there is a little link to a YouTube video telling you more about this process. I'm going to go over just a couple submission errors that you want to avoid. Most that we've already mentioned. Your SAM record must be up to date at the time of submission. You want to make sure that you have the correct AOR designated in your Grants.gov registration, so when it comes time to submit, that person can actually submit it. The naming convention, so we have learned over the years that Grants.gov does not like the use of special characters and file names. So if you're uploading a PDF, you have your file named as FY18 grant, farm to school grant with an exclamation point or underscores or hyphens or percentages. Don't give in to the temptation to do that, because Grants.gov will kick it back to you. You don't want to submit too late, and by late we mean, you know, the day it's due. But if it's like late in the day, I think the due date is at 11:59 p.m. You don't want to start doing it at 11:30. You're not giving yourself any room for mistakes, which takes me right to the last bullet: submitting on the due date. I know we have a due date. We have to pick a due date, but we really want you to ignore the due date and pretend that it's sooner. It's like when I'm trying to tell my mom what time to get somewhere, I always tell her an hour earlier. Okay. We're going to run out of time here, so I'm going to whiz through. We've got some required forms. Some are required for all applicants, and some are only required for certain applicants. The 424 forms are required for everybody. These, along with the disclosure of lobbying activity forms, are in the application package on Grants.gov, and they must be included in order for your application to even be accepted. So without them, Grants.gov will kick it back to you. And then unique to the farm to school grants, the farm to school cover sheet is also required for all applicants. If you are a for-profit or a nonprofit corporation, you must also complete the AD 3030, which is regarding felony conviction and tax status, and there's more instructions on that form as far as who has to complete it. And then nonprofits also have to include their 501c3 letter from the IRS. The required format, and I believe this is covered in the RFA. There's the application checklist on page 4. You want to have a table of contents. There's page maximums for the different grant tracks, and then 12-point font, Times New Roman, and please number your pages. As I mentioned, the applications are due at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on December 8th, 2017. So you've got just over 60 days to write your applications. Let us know if you're having issues with the application process. DUNS, SAM, and Grants.gov all have helplines. You can visit their websites for more information. Please follow the rules regarding naming conventions. And did I mention that you should submit your application a little bit early? We highly recommend that. Now I'm going to quickly shift to the budget requirements. You must submit a budget, which is on your SF424A form. And you need to submit a budget narrative, which further itemizes your budget items and it links the budget items to the activities described in your proposal. So the 424A, oh, you're one ahead of me. The 424A is the actual budget form. You're going to complete it online if you're using Workspace on Grants.gov, but you can also download a hard copy and you can use it as a working document, and then when you're ready to submit your application, you can transfer that information over, and instructions are included with the form on Grants.gov. This is an example of the second page of a completed 424A, and I'm highlighting this page because this is the page where we see a lot of mistakes. You want to fill out 2 columns on this page, and the first is your federal request, and the second is for your match. The form will actually do a little bit of math for you. It'll sum the amounts for you, and it'll sum the federal, the match, and then your total budget amount. But please don't forget to do both columns on this page. And then the next one is your budget narrative, and I'm just going to say you cannot be too detailed in your budget narrative. One of the most common things that I go back to applicants for is further itemization of budget items. Examples could be salaries. You want to say what the position is, the position title. What is their percentage of time or how many hours dedicated to the project? What are their job duties? Travel, the number of tips, the type of travel. Are you driving? Are you flying? What are you doing? And so all the different itemized information for the budget. And the Farm to School website has a sample budget narrative format that you can look at, and there's a link on this slide for that. Okay, indirect costs are those costs that benefit more than just the proposed grant project. So things like utility costs, salary for other staff, things like that. If you are going to claim indirect costs in your budget, you need to include a negotiated indirect cost rate approval letter. It's usually with some federal agency, often the Department of Education for our applicant pool. If you have an agreement, you can't get your hands on it, you can put it in your budget, but before we will award the grant, you're going to have to produce that agreement if you want to claim indirect costs. And then lastly for me is the matching funds. As Maika mentioned earlier, you must provide a 25% match of your total project cost. It has to come from non-federal sources. You want to include it in your budget narrative, but you want to be very clear on what is the match and what is the federal grant award. Maika's got a really cool match calculator that's going to be posted eventually on the Farm to School website, but you can see the sample calculation here. This is a $90,000 project. The federal request is $65,000 and the match is $25,000. So that actually works out to a little bit more than $25,000. This grantee is putting in 28%. But you just want to be really clear in your application on what is match and what is not. Some examples of matching funds, you can actually put funds in the budget. Your agency or organization can contribute funds for grant activities. In-kind services or activities or materials count. You need to show what the, based on fair market value. If somebody is volunteering their time, you want to do the average hourly wages for that type of thing. And you want to make sure that you document your matching funds. As far as what else is allowable, essentially if it's allowable for the federal piece, it is allowable for the match, and then vice versa. If you're not allowed to get something with your matching funds, with your federal funds, you cannot use it for your matching funds. So Maika's earlier example of meals, if you want to provide a training and you want to feed your trainees, you may not even use matching funds for that. That has to come out of another pot that's not related with this. So I am going to turn it back over to Maika to talk as fast as she can.
My apologies. There's just so much great information to share with you all, and we are clearly running out of time. So forgive us, forgive us. I'm going to just zoom through these last few slides, and then for folks who are able to hang on the line, Anna and I are happy to hang out and field a couple of questions. So thank you for bearing with us. So really quickly, with writing your proposal, a few tips and tricks we wanted to tell you all. Make sure that you are critically thinking about building your team. So we know that applying for a federal grant is a lot of work, and oftentimes the various pieces of the proposal require expertise from people in various departments. So definitely think critically about who can be providing perspective or insight in terms of crafting your proposal, whether it's writing pieces of your proposal or simply being that extra eye to review and look over certain pieces to kind of make sure that you're filling in all of the gaps. So be specific with your ask in terms of, when you're asking people to join your team and contribute to your Farm to School grant program proposal. So telling your story, and this is really where the magic, I feel like, is in a really good grant proposal. Those grant writers who do not assume that the reviewer knows anything about their community or their circumstances or why they are great or why their project will be so great are oftentimes those grant proposals that score really well, as those are the ones that make sure to kind of put themselves in the place of the reviewers and look really closely at that score sheet criteria to make sure that each part of the proposal narrative is providing every desired piece of information in a logical, clear manner in which your reviewer doesn't have to draw any conclusions. You actually state logically why you're picking partners, why you decided to do this project, provide supporting data, talk about the unique aspects of your community or target audience, and the unique place that your school or community is in terms of farm to school development. So make sure you tell us your story fully, wholly, logically, rationally. Really make it clear. So there are some farm to school tools or sources you can be using for data. So we definitely want to highlight the Farm to School Census, which will provide you some really fantastic information from school districts across the nation, kind of noting the amount of local produce or the state of farm to school activities, kind of regionally and by state across the nation. So use data to support the story that you're trying to tell with your grant proposal. As I mentioned, make sure to put yourself in the shoes of the reviewer. They're reading multiple applications, and what is going to make your application stand out. So make sure that you're clear and you're really following that criteria in the score sheet, but also making sure to not make assumptions about what the reviewers know about your community or the need for farm to school in your area. So some quick additional resources. Please sign up for the DIRT, which is the Office of Community Food Systems e-newsletter. It has a lot of fantastic updates about webinar info, what's going on in terms of farm to school activities across the nation, relevant news, and we have over 26,000 subscribers, so be a cool kid and join the crowd. So make sure to subscribe at USDA.gov/farm-to-school. Also, any updates that are made to the RFA, if there are any gaps or updates that are made, updates to the FAQs. If you haven't, please go read the frequently asked questions. Many of your questions will be answered in that wonderful document. The e-letter will make sure to kind of give you late-breaking news about the RFA, so you want to be subscribed. Our fantastic website, USDA.gov/farm-to-school, there is an applicant resources page. It will be your best friend throughout this process. Please go visit there. Check out the sample materials. Check out the FAQ. Check out the calculator. We have a lot of really great resources that are on there to help you as you're crafting your proposal. So please check out the applicant resource page. We also have really pretty materials that talk a lot about various farm-to-school strategies and best practices about selling and buying local foods. So please check out the Farm-to-School website for these really great fact sheets, some of which talk about getting local meat and traditional foods into the classrooms. Some of these fact sheets may inspire the very projects that you're trying to develop. So take a look at the resources that we have posted on our website. I also wanted to let you know that we are a fantastic team comprised of 7 incredibly smart, talented individuals across the country who are servicing and providing technical assistance for farm-to-school activities for the 7 FNS regions. So if you go to our website, you can find their contact information there, but I did want you to know that we have a team that is based throughout the nation. Whew! 4:06. I think we made it. So thank you for bearing with me again. I'm so sorry. I try to be really respectful of people's time. So again, thank you for joining us. We're so excited that you're interested in the Farm to School grant program. We're really looking forward to receiving your applications. At this time, we're going to host some Q&A. If you have to drop, feel free. We will eventually get this posted. If you can hang on the line, please do so. We'll field some questions. So the first question I have here is, where are we supposed to attach the budget narrative? The instructions say where to attach other components, but not the budget narrative. So you can attach the budget narrative to the Add Attachment button under SF 42415. So it's the same as the other places. It's listed on page 4 of the RFA. You're right, it's not directly called out, but you can attach it there. Okay. On the Grants.gov page, it says, in the case where an SFA exists, the application must come from the SFA. Does this mean that a nonprofit cannot submit an application for a school that has an SFA? No, that is not true. A nonprofit is able to submit an application. I'm like looking Anna in the eye. Is able to submit an application, and a school can be a key partner or a key target for those particular activities. So we would recommend before submitting an application that as the nonprofit that you're engaging with that target school, perhaps getting a support letter or two from that community to really show that you have the support of them in doing that work. Okay. Are some grants partially awarded? So we talked about how many of the grants have a range. So oftentimes what we try to do is fully award a full project, if that makes sense. If an application is selected and there are certain activities that cannot be funded due to the rules around grant requirements, those activities will not be funded. So yes, your grant could be partially funded, but as a rule of thumb, we try to fully fund a project. So we try to stay away from selecting a project and only funding half of it. We really try to seek to fund the entire project.
I'm going to add on to that. Sometimes something will be included in the budget that's not an allowable cost that may or may not affect the actual outcome of the project. And in those cases, if it's an application that we're seriously considering for funding, we will come back and say, you need to remove this item from your budget, at which point you have the opportunity to say, okay, or you can say, I just don't see how we can do this project without it, and then we would discuss it further from there, but it wouldn't be a surprise to you.
Another question that we have, if we are a child care program, would we be able to apply for the Farm to School program? So I'm going to need a little bit more information. So Sarah, I'm going to ask that you email the Farm to School inbox, so farmtoschool@fns.usda.gov. So for folks who are asking the eligibility questions, the first place to start is, am I an eligible entity? So are you a school or school district that operates the National School Lunch Program or Breakfast Program, or some other entity that operates that program? That's where you should start. Are you an Indian tribal organization? Are you a state or local agency? Are you a nonprofit? Are you a small or medium-sized agricultural producer? So always kind of think of it from that perspective. What am I an eligible entity type? And then that kind of allows us to kind of go through the logical steps to determine whether or not you can receive grant funds. So Sarah, please shoot me an email at Farm to School, and we'll try to get that question answered for you. Would we be eligible if our institution of higher education is considered an entity of the state and therefore government? This is another one that I'm going to push to the Farm School inbox. So Melissa, shoot me an email. I have some follow-up questions for you.
I will state, this is Anna, I will state that by state agency, we typically mean state agencies that are administering our child nutrition programs at FNS. So most often it's the State Department of Education. Occasionally it is the State Department of Health. Those are the two state agencies that most often administer the National School Lunch and the school breakfast program at the local level. So that's our broad definition of state agency, but we'll tackle this question a little bit more offline when we can have a little back and forth.
Yep, agreed. And just to tag on to Anna, as well as the Department of Agriculture, that's another one that we typically will see, or the Office of Public Instruction. So on page 13 of the RFA, there is a definition for state agency, but in regards to this question, please email us and we're happy to really tease it out for you. Okay. Do you define equipment as a single item with a cost of $5,000 or more?
That is the legal definition of equipment. We are going to look at the type of equipment and make sure that it is applicable to your grant, to your project, and there are some things that that we take a little bit further with what we call agency directive, and there are some things that we don't fund for farm to school grants, even though legally, just in legal grant speak, there might be allowable. One of which is vehicles, and that's because these are 1 to 2 year grants, and we don't necessarily want you purchasing something for long-term use. So you would then lease it instead of purchase it. There are other rules regarding the disposition of equipment upon the end of the grant period, and so we just want to make sure that everybody is aware of those and writes it into their grant, what their plans are after the end of the grant period for that equipment.
I have a question from Daniel. He wants to know, match from whom when you were talking about match?
Match, well, technically match from the applicant, but you can have volunteers working on the project that will become a collaborator on the grant, so it could come in the form of volunteer hours. It could be services from a local agribusiness or another nonprofit that works in the field that can provide goods or services that are pertinent to the grant project.
Stephanie wanted to know, will we apply through the new workspace?
We hope you will. Regardless, you'll apply through Grants.gov, and Grants.gov has the two options, workspace or just uploading a PDF. We think that workspace is better and easier, and that's going to be the only option starting next calendar year.
So I have a question basically about the repeat awardee and who can apply and can't apply. So I do want to provide a clarification, and it is clearly stated in the RFA. But essentially, for implementation grantees, support service grantees, and training grantees, if you received an award in fiscal year 17 or 16, you are ineligible to apply for FY18. Now, if you are a planning grantee and received an award in fiscal year 17 or 16, you may still apply for an award because maybe you're applying for an implementation award. That's the thought. However, we want to be clear, by being a former planning grantee, that does not give you an advantage to getting awarded for an implementation grant. Due to the high competition or competitive nature of this particular grant opportunity, we often are looking to grant folks that have never been awarded before, if possible. So do keep that in mind if you're trying to determine whether or not, as a former planning grantee, if it's a good use of resources to apply for a Farm to School grant this year. Anything to add? Okay. All right, we are at 4:15. Should we keep the show going?
If they've got questions, I'm happy to continue answering.
Okay. It's just it keeps bubbling. I can't keep up. I have another kind of like, we've received a grant, so let me tackle that. We received a grant in what we believe is fiscal year 2015. The grant was awarded in November 2015. Since the funds are used for a 2016 program, I just want to be sure we are eligible to apply again for a new program.
Look at your grant award documents. If it says FY15 on it, even FY15 starts at the actual end of the calendar year. So you might be implementing activities in calendar year 2016. So look at your grant award documents and see what it says on there, because it will say FY15 or FY16 on there.
Okay. Do DUNS numbers expire?
Nope.
Okay. That was easy. What if the nonprofit program has the same DUNS number as the college?
Then it's the college. That's probably another one that will need more information and have to answer offline.
So Melissa, shoot an email to the farmtoschool@fns.usda inbox, and we're happy to field that one for you. Okay, so Micah mentioned that an organization can only submit one application per type of program. If an organization has several locations with, this thing keeps moving, with separate DUNS for each, does this same guidance apply? I'm not sure that I completely understand the question, but let me take a stab. So there are certain cases in which organizations may be a fiscal sponsor for a particular entity, and we do discuss that in the RFA. So we will allow a fiscal representative or sponsor to apply on the behalf of more than one organization, and we will recognize that as two separate entities and applications. Please clearly state in the narrative somewhere that you have a fiscal sponsor that is applying on your behalf, so that we can recognize that and not weed you out for submitting two applications. If I did not directly answer your question, please shoot me an email, farmtoschool@fns.usda.gov, and I'm happy to follow up. Okay. So lastly, in reviewing the proposals, how important is the reach of a proposed project? Will proposals that reach a larger audience of schools/students receive higher priority? So it is prioritized that applications that reach more than one school are prioritized. Certainly when we're getting down to the nitty-gritty and there are applications that are very close in score, we will in fact take a look at the reach of that project. So yes, it is in fact a factor later on down the process. Okay. Sorry, some of your questions are just so robust. This is a longer one. We have had applicants and communities apply via Grants.gov, received confirmation that their application was submitted, complete. However, the documents did not arrive on the other side. Applicants were notified of being incomplete or scored 0 due to missing documents and were not allowed to resubmit the missing documents. After months of research internally, we found that the documents failed to upload to staff, even though the applicant was told their application was uploaded. Has this issue been resolved?
I'm not exactly sure what happened there. I don't know if it was one of the required forms or if it was so that Grants.gov might have acknowledged the original submission, but then when they were validating it, they found errors and then bumped it back. That's more of a question for Grants.gov, though. When you do submit your application, you should get the emails from Grants.gov should come pretty quickly. So when you do submit, if you don't get something that says that it has been received and accepted by FNS, let us know and we can try to investigate for you, as well as contact Grants.gov if you're not sure. I wish it was our system so we could say, oh yeah, I can look on the back end and see what we've got, but it's not. Grants.gov is its own entity. It's separate from FNS or USDA.
So can you explain the equipment purchase restrictions associated with the planning grant?
No. Well, the thing with planning grants that Maika mentioned is that there's really not that much, we don't anticipate that there's much need for equipment in a planning grant. If you can justify the equipment, you can certainly ask for it, and then we'll tell you yes or no if we're considering your application. In general, equipment, as I mentioned earlier, is $5,000 or more is considered equipment, and there is more complicated disposition requirements at the end of the grant period. You have to show that the material, whatever it is you purchase, the equipment will continue to be used in an FNS program. If you're not going to keep the equipment, there's requirements for how you have to dispose of the equipment, whether you sell it or you donate it, what is the useful life? There's a million questions, more than I could probably go over right now.
Yeah, and then just to add, generally speaking, for planning and training grants, equipment isn't an allowable cost, just given the nature of that kind of work. But as Anna mentioned, not to be confused with supplies and paper,
right.
These things are totally allowable costs. But buying a large food processor for a planning grant doesn't quite make sense, since you are mostly planning and engaging with stakeholders and identifying challenges and things of that nature. So I hope that clears that up a bit. Can one principal represent several principal schools in the same district? I guess I can take this one. Yes, that is totally possible. I mean, a principal can apply on the behalf of their school. It is recommended that they have the support of the various stakeholders in that school district, and certainly other schools in that district can be a key partner or collaborator on a given application.
That's when you want your support letters in there from the school saying that they're going to participate.
Exactly.
I wasn't understanding principal to be school principal.
Oh, is that why?
I gave you that look a while ago.
I was that's not that strange. A question came in, how strict are you with 40% free and reduced price minimum and only one school? So I'm going to read into this question a bit. So it's not required that a school have at least 40% or free and reduced price, but that is a priority and an intention of kind of targeting these funds to schools that have a high free and reduced price population. And we're looking to make sure that these funds can reach as many students as possible, which is why we also prioritize projects that impact more than one school. So you are welcome to apply if you're only one school and less than 40% free and reduced price. However, you must recognize that we're really hoping to have proposals that kind of meet that criteria. All right, I got the official nod from Anna.
That's your wheelhouse.
Are the required forms all included in the workspace?
Yes.
The one thing I wanted to flag is if you're a nonprofit, we do require that you submit your 501c3 status determination letter that was given to you by the IRS. So that is an attachment that's required when you submit your proposal and does not exist in Workspace.
It's not a form.
It's not a form, exactly.
Yeah.
But a required attachment. Again, please, in all of this, read the RFA, read the RFA, read the RFA. Is there a limitation for what you can add for attachments? No, there technically is not, but we would ask that you be strategic in the attachments that you're submitting. We want to make sure that reviewers aren't overwhelmed with too many additional pieces of paperwork that they may not be able to understand why they're included with your application. So be strategic, be clear as to why certain attachments are being added to your grant application package. So I saw, like, I'm sure some people are on here like, oh, she didn't get to my question. So there are some questions in here that are very specific about eligibility. And I encourage those people to please email me those questions in the Farm to School inbox, farmtoschool@fns.usda.gov. I'm going to have follow-up questions for you to be able to answer your eligibility question. So it's going to be a back and forth. So please email there, and we'll get a response to you. Rosa, maybe you want to resend your question. I can't find it in the midst of all these questions in the question box. So go ahead and resubmit that. So Matthew asked, what kind of farm to school experience are you looking for, if not a previous grant? So if you haven't received a previous farm to school grant, perhaps there are farm to school activities that you've been doing at your school, perhaps in your local wellness policy. There are some activities that you've been implementing that impact bringing local foods into your school or school cafeteria, or integrated curriculum that gives children hands-on experience about learning where their where produce comes from. So it's really thinking about what kind of existing farm to school activities are already happening, and you could share those things with us. So it's not that you have to have received a previous farm to school grant, but just really think about what farm to school activities have been happening in your school or community or organization. So applying for a planning grant after reading zillions of pages, feeling overwhelmed. True, that should focus on one or two objectives. I hate to hear that you're feeling overwhelmed. We don't want any of our applicants to feel that way. Yes, I think it is best to really focus in on a handful of goals that would be manageable for you to execute on. So really think critically about what's going to have the biggest impact and what staffing and resources you'll be able to equip yourself or organization with if you were to receive the funding to actually execute on that idea. So don't be overwhelmed. You can do it. Just kind of sit back and think about what's going to have the most impact for your school or community. So we're just going to wrap this up. We're almost at 4:30. So let me see if there are any more general questions in here. Okay, I'm not really seeing any more general questions in the question box. I just want to remind folks that applications, do they have to be double-spaced? No, applications do not have to be double-spaced. Times New Roman 12, numbered pages. And then Okay. So thank you all for joining us. It is 4:30. The questions that are left are pretty specific. Again, I'm going to ask folks who didn't get their questions answered to email us at farmtoschool@fns.usda.gov, and we'll get those responses out to you all. Again, when crafting your proposal, one of the biggest things to keep in the back of your mind is my project in line with the intention and vision for the Farm to School grant program, which is to bring local produce into school cafeterias. So that can be executed and look a lot of different ways, but you really want to make sure that you're circling your project back to that critical aim. Okay, so again, thank you for joining us. Anna and I had a blast with you all. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And I'll be sending out this presentation as well as some really fantastic resources that'll help you all as you start to craft your proposals. All right. I hope everyone takes care. Bye-bye.